right, so episode 29. To say the least, it was a very rough week. If you listen to the podcast at all, you know I've been searching for a new role for a while now. And a few weeks ago, I finally came around to one that I was actually really excited for, right? And I was qualified. I had internal connections and multiple references within the company. I had 2 interviews. Both of them went great. I was given this really big project and I turned it in ahead of time. It was all good. And I didn't get it. So it was crushing. I just thought that I executed this perfectly, and no, things didn't turn out like how I wanted them to. So back to square one, but this got me in a pretty rough state of mind. I was just completely unmotivated and just hopeless, right? I put hours and hours into this process, and it's all I've been able to just really think about for months on end, and I just can't seem to land anything. It's so frustrating. But the last few days I've been pretty down on myself, right? The only question that's repeating internally is just what am I doing wrong? Because I'm not being given the answer, right, as to why I'm not being selected or given a shot for an interview, whatever it is. But it's just, what am I doing wrong? So after a very open conversation with my partner about this, she's just like, hey, you need to take a step back, right? Focus on something else, just at least for a day, because I tend to hyperfixate and hyperfocus on certain things in my life. I have an amazing life. I'm so fortunate for the things that I do have. But if there's one thing wrong at all, it's just all that consumes my mind. And it could be anything from finding a job, for example, to the dog having an ear infection, to something being wrong with the house. All of these things are within my control to fix, right? Keep applying to jobs and try to have a positive attitude. Go to the vet and get an antibiotic if needed. Call the home warranty company and get someone out to fix the issue. All of these problems are so minute and they're so small in the grand scheme of things. But when they come up, I treat it like, oh my God, how can this happen? And it's all I can think about. So today I want to dive into the topic of this hyperfixating trait of mine. To start, I think from an outside perspective, I may seem pretty calm. I'm very monotone. I'm very dry. I'm not easily excited. I'm stoic in showing no emotion probably 99% of the time to the outside world. But internally, I am just this anxiety-filled, chaotic mess. And only my fiance really is lucky enough to get to see this side of me. But hyperfixation is defined as the complete absorption in a task to a point where a person appears to completely ignore or tune out everything else. Now, for some people, they can get hyper focused on things like video games, binge watching a TV show, things that you just don't want to break away from, right? These are generally a escape for a lot of people. For me, it's hyperfixation on a problem. I cannot find happiness until I solve this one thing, whatever it is. And there's always something, right? Something always comes up. For example, the second I find a job, something else is going to just fill in this gap, this space of something for me to hyper-focus on. But when I am so focused on solving a problem, everything else in my life just seems to take a back seat. The gym stops becoming a priority for me. My sleep really suffers. My hunger just disappears, and I'll skip meals and forget to eat. I forget to text people back in my life, and start neglecting friends and family members, which is horrible, right? It's not fair to them at all. But on the flip side, this characteristic can also be seen as a positive for some people in some regards. When it comes to my work, I can become so hyper-focused on finding a solution that I can get a pretty solid end result most of the time, whether it be a campaign or an edit or even something as small as finding the right tagline. I want it to be perfect. So I will invest just every second I have racking my brain or doing a lot of research to solve it or to find whatever I think a good answer is. And in order to avoid this, I'll even try to clear my mind sometimes, right? And at the end of the night, I'll just be scrolling on Instagram, and without hesitation, if I see a video or a trend, I need to save it and put it into a folder and be like, oh, I could use this for X. For example, I've saved probably 20 plus videos right now for multiple jobs that I didn't even get. And it's just because when I'm mindlessly scrolling, I can come across a trend where I was like, I need to save this in case I get this job, right? I'm working without even having the job, because in the back of my mind, I need to do whatever I can do to win this position or to get a leg up if I get awarded this position, right? I need to start like guns blazing. And ironically, right, like neither of them worked out. So that's just great. I have all these saved Instagram reels for no reason, but I can never just relax when there's a problem to be solved. It's almost like I have this inexhaustible energy sometimes. If I feel like there's more I can do, I'll just keep going until I find the answer. But how do I overcome this, right? What is the solution? What are some things that I can do? Well, first, I like to find a creative outlet, right? Having this podcast takes hours out of my week that I could be putting somewhere else. But this time that I spend thinking about a topic, writing out my thoughts, filming this, editing this, and making thumbnails is so therapeutic to me. It's time that each week where I say, no matter what's going on in my life, like this is for me. For example, the end of the week was quickly approaching and I hadn't done any prep work for this episode because I was just such in a bad state of mind, right? I was just defeated. But talking through this gives me something productive to focus on, to put my energy towards, and that's why I like to do it. Am I missing out on some new job posts right now just by filming this? Yes, but they'll still be there in a few hours, so it's okay. Next, what I try to do is exhaust myself physically as much as possible when I'm hyperfixating on things. Things like going to the gym, taking the dog for a walk, doing anything that really keeps me active. Sitting in front of my laptop while all of the stress and anxiety just grows is just not a solution. Finding time to step away and exert energy into something else, like the gym, really helps. Now, it's incredibly hard to find the motivation a lot of time to get to the gym, but after I'm done, I always feel so much better. I couldn't find the motivation, for example, to go to the gym yesterday, Thursday this week, and I ended up staying up until like 1:30 a.m., just freaking out, stressing on LinkedIn, scrolling, looking for anything, just because I had the energy really to do so. So I find that if you get yourself so tired by the end of the day, it can sometimes be really the only way that you can really calm down your mind and actually get some sleep at night. Next, make plans. Being unemployed, you'd think I'd have all of this free time, right? But I'm actually pretty busy. Like, surprisingly, I don't know how. But I've found that creating a list of items to complete every day has been extremely beneficial for me and for my mental health. It keeps me on task, keeps me proactive. It's basically me tricking myself so that I don't just spend all day hyperfixating on this one thing. For example, I usually do 2 to 3 household chores, such as the laundry, making dinner, grocery shopping, anything like that. 1 to 2 physical activities, like I mentioned, walking the dog, going to the gym. 2 to 3 everyday items. For instance, I need to go get a smog check, do a thumbnail for this podcast, check off maybe an item for my upcoming wedding, scheduling weekend plans, writing or journaling for 15 minutes a day is great. I always try to check that off as much as possible. And then I have these high priority items. In this case, it would be apply for jobs, schedule interviews, or maybe like send a few emails, do some outreach for myself. I will typically try to make this list while I'm drinking my my morning cup of coffee. And from there on, I'm just really continually just crossing things off throughout the day. This keeps me on track. It makes me feel productive. It's much more beneficial for me to complete this list rather than spend 8 hours on the computer just siphoning through different job boards, right? Let's commit to like 1.5 hour sessions looking for jobs instead, and complete some other items on this list like I mentioned. There is a science to this though. If you make the list too short, you'll just find yourself fixating on this one high priority task. So if you didn't spend enough time filling up your day, right? If you make the list too long, however, you'll find yourself just getting demotivated because you're not completing your to-do list. Instead, you'll feel like you didn't accomplish enough, right? You'll feel like shit. It doesn't help in any way. So you need to find the right balance of things on your to-do list, and that's different for every person. Finally, I try to sit down for 20 minutes a day just to let everything sink in times where I'm incredibly just stressed out or having a lot of anxiety or just negative thoughts throwing through my mind, right? I really like the idea of transcendental meditation. Now, how transcendental meditation is supposed to be done is you go see a coach for a one-on-one session, and then you receive a mantra. And after you receive your mantra, you're supposed to sit down twice a day for 20 minutes each, once in the morning and then once like late afternoon. And then the goal is to settle your body down to a state of restful alertness. It's not guided. You don't need to focus on your breathing. You don't need to sit there just like a mummy, like with an itch on your nose, not being able to move. Your mantra just becomes the object of your attention, really. So I personally have not been to a coach or received a mantra or any of that. So I don't want to dive too deep into this like I'm an expert on the matter, but I've definitely have done some research on this. I've read a couple books about it or listened to some audiobooks on it. A few months ago, I wanted to see if I could just be consistent enough to implement these 20 minutes out of my day and just sit there quietly, right? Eyes closed, just kind of letting any thought that pops into my mind just kind of like run its course. And I found that it really did help, and it kind of puts things into perspective. And I found that I came out of these 20-minute sessions just a lot calmer, a lot more at ease, and a lot more grateful for all the positive things going on in my life, whatever they may be. Now, like all things though, I got too busy, and something that I was doing every day, twice a day, turned into once a day, then once every other day, and then maybe like once a week. But I'd really like to start this back up again, get this back into my daily rotation, because it made me take a step back and really appreciate everything that I do have, right? It made me focus on the positive, calmed me down, and it like grounded me essentially. So that being said, if you are like me and you find yourself just hyperfixating on all your problems 24/7, I hope that some of these techniques can really help you, right? Challenges and obstacles are just a part of life, and as I get older, I'm realizing that these problems are just never going to go away, right? They're just going to change, and it's something that's always just going to be there as a problem. But instead of just focusing on this problem and just being overcome by them with anxiety, I need to learn to embrace them, learn from them, and really find meaning in them, right? I recently came across something that Alex Hormozy said that I really liked. He talks about how sadness comes from a lack of perceived options. Asking yourself just over and over again, what do I do? That's just ignorance. Instead, you can look at it as, what can I do to learn more? So you start to shift this hopelessness into something solvable. What measurable steps can I take to move in the right direction? And from there, you're really just on your way. And that's something that I really like, and I'm trying to take into my everyday life, right? What steps can I take to just make this better and not just sit in a state of hopelessness? That's not going to solve anything. But I think that's all that I have for this week. I'll try to be in better spirits next week. I apologize. Nobody wants to listen to me just complain for 15 to 20 minutes. That's just no fun. But finishing up this recording is another productive thing that I can check off today's to-do list. So that's great. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And with that, I will talk to you next week.